adopting Bitcoin and having a new way to look at the future has helped me to actually become way more spiritual in who am I, where am I from, what am I doing here, what's my purpose, what's my value, what should I do? You need time and space to actually realize that there's this other side of you that you can explore.
I don't think we can even really imagine the future that is possible.
I think it's quite incredible that we get the chance to live through this.
I was just walking through life asleep, like a sheep, just being herded by these systems and outsourcing all of my control and all my power to things outside of me.
It is either Bitcoin, self-sovereignty, self-governance, and the self-actualization we talked about, or you are a subject of someone else. If you agree that the other person is no better than you, and you shouldn't outsource any aspect of your life to that other person, then you should not go along with that, right? It's a very binary choice. Do I want to take ownership of my life?
Bitcoin made me realize that I don't need to outsource things. I can just find the power within myself and then live from within. Just tap into the power within. Today on The Signal, I'm joined by Bram Kanstein, a Bitcoin enthusiast, creative entrepreneur, and host of the Bitcoin for Millennials podcast, where he's interviewed hundreds of guests about how Bitcoin can transform our lives and our future. Bram, it's an absolute honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be on this side of the mic too sometimes. So fun. And I love that you're focusing on the spiritual part. So I think we'll have a fun conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoy your show a lot. I watched all of your episodes and yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So why don't we start there at the spiritual side?
Yeah.
I know you've interviewed hundreds of people in the Bitcoin space. And one of the things that I love exploring here on The Signal is that deeper spiritual side of Bitcoin. So what have you learned from your guests about the spiritual or the deeper life aspects of Bitcoin? And are there like common threads that seem to stand out to you that keep coming up with your guests?
Yeah. I think you could think about it in a way about Bitcoin, but maybe also just the spiritual part of life on the other side after you adopt Bitcoin, right? Like, I think, I love it. It's a very broad question, but I like it. It's a good start to explore. At least for me, talking from just personal experience, I think adopting Bitcoin and having a certain new way to look at the future, I think has helped me to actually become way more spiritual in the now, if that makes sense. I think I sometimes talk about creating time and space to actually go on this inward journey, I think is what many people need, right? I do think a lot of people come to spirituality in their life through like big life events or like traumatic life events, which of course is a great trigger, but it of course is not a nice experience to have and to then get there. So I think if people want to explore the spiritual side of the human experience, right, like that, I really believe that we are a spiritual being having a human experience, but that we all know that when we are children, right, and then see the world differently and are very curious and open and all these things, and that we fall into this physical life over time with our spirit, and that kind of we get lost in that, right? And that, if I connect it to Bitcoin, the fiat money system keeps you stuck in the physical world. There's a lot of mental focus on the physical world because of the fiat money system, right? So whether that is getting more fiat money, getting actual more money, or thinking like, what else can I buy to improve my life, and doing the more degenerate things that you can do in your physical life, whatever you think is degenerate, doesn't really matter, but really focusing on that the real physical life, everything outside of your body that you can interact with your body, right? Instead of focusing on what is inside of you, I think is something that the fiat money system actually creates and perpetuates, right? And so I've always said you need time and space to actually realize that there's this other side of you that you can explore, that I now think you should explore. Eventually, it's about the unity of being both of these things at the same time, or as I now think, the body is like the ultimate manifestation of the consciousness that you are, and that you are constantly experiencing in the now forever, like you're experiencing yourself in the now forever. But like to get there or to get back to that, I think you need a certain time and space to actually go on that journey, whatever the journey is for you, whatever you've experienced in your life, whatever you need or how you get there doesn't really matter. But I think a lot of people are distracted in the physical life, and so they don't even have time and space to focus on that spiritual part. And so I think in my experience, the combination of a few life events combined with actually adopting Bitcoin, not even necessarily in that order or with that goal, I think have helped me a lot to actually go more on the inner journey and explore that, and also be captivated by that journey and trying to see and understand and feel and experience that part of what I think I am now. And I think Bitcoin helps with that, because I think it gives you a better outlook towards the future, and gives you, I think, also the right incentive to go on that inward journey. Whereas, I think in the fiat money system, people are just too distracted. It's very unconscious, right? People are not aware of the fact that it's happening. But that's how I view it now. And so I think a common thread is that a lot of people have actually found a spiritual path in their life after adopting Bitcoin, because they, again, when I say time and space, it's not necessarily having a physical space, it's mental space also, right? So when you at least feel more empowered or more secure about your future, there's also certain things that you can let go that maybe were occupying your brain or your mind before. That I also see as the space to have the option, at least, to explore the more spiritual path. And so I think a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds have actually ended up on that same type of individual journey. And that, I think, is very interesting, because we talk a lot about the incentives of fiat money and what Bitcoin could bring us and all these things. But I think I've actually seen it with a lot of people, that they actually are just way more conscious in the now. And I think that would probably be a net benefit for everyone who is alive. So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I love the way you broke down so many things there. And it gets back to what I talk about a lot, is about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow created the pyramid of human needs, and at the base of it is food and shelter and security. And that's what fiat does. It keeps us trapped at the lower levels of that pyramid. And that's what Bitcoin allows us to do, is allows us to move up that pyramid. So instead of worrying every single minute about how you're going to get food and shelter and devoting all of your energy to that, you're allowed to move upwards and focus on your relationships and focus on love and belonging and community. And then at the top of that is self-actualization. And that's why so many Bitcoiners are moving up that triangle and going on this journey of self-actualization. And then I always talk about how that individual path mirrors the path that society is going on too. So as more individuals transcend and go up that pyramid and become self-actualized, then society as a collective is going to become collectively actualized as well. And that's what gets me just so excited about Bitcoin. Just the future is just so bright with Bitcoin. I don't think we can even really imagine the future that is possible with Bitcoin.
I think it's quite incredible that we get the chance to live through this, right? Like literally what you said, I think might go over a lot of people's heads. But in a way that if you don't see Bitcoin, you also don't see this, what you just said, I would say. And so the people that are stuck in the fiat money paradigm, would probably dismiss what you say or just not understand that. If you watch TV every day and you think that everything you see there is everything that's going on in the world, then you probably have a very pessimistic outlook and a very nihilistic attitude towards the future. But I definitely agree. I really believe in, the sort of like pendulum swing, in a sense, like that over certain time frames. We go up, then we go down, and then we go back up and down again, etc. And it feels like we are on a slow grind up, although there's a lot of chaos and a lot of stuff that is happening. But there's also many things that are happening at the same time and converging eventually, which I would say eventually will force people to some sort of enlightenment with regards to, their physical experience in this world. And I feel that Bitcoin, actually adopting Bitcoin, is some sort of a primer to that. Like, I feel that if you agree that even if you just agree that there will be some sort of technology induced chaos through AI, right, where people will lose, I think, a sense of belonging and understanding of their place in the world and their added value and all these things. Their intellect is commoditized through this global, very disruptive technology. That on one side, I will think there will be a lot of suicides, but on the other side, I also think there will be a lot of enlightened people, just because you're forced with such a massive step change that you didn't even realize before. And that, I think, yeah, it's probably just the course of where it's going. But I feel that if you adopt Bitcoin, you're at least prepared for that shock, and you have a certain asset that you can use to survive that time of turmoil before we get out of that again. And I'm not sure how long that's going to take. But if I listen to what's his name, Saad, what's his name, the AI,
Sad or something.
He was on a podcast with Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. If you listen to that, and that's someone who knows way more about this than I do, although I'm interested in following this, then yeah, that's a dark picture, but I don't necessarily perceive that as a bad thing. I don't know if I took a certain exit here in this conversation now, but I just think that with Bitcoin, you feel way more empowered by your focus and attention as to what you're doing to create value, to then store that value. And so it forces you to be more conscious about what you're doing, right? That starts perhaps in the beginning when you get into Bitcoin, being more frugal with your spending or whatever, deciding if you should buy a house or not, or take a certain job or not, or whatever you're doing to stack Bitcoin. But that kind of like consciousness about what you're doing eventually evolves or permeates through all these other aspects of the experience of life.
Yeah, I love that you talk about that, and talk about that a lot. I call it the Bitcoin awakening. How for me, Bitcoin was really the tip of the iceberg, just realizing how manipulated the financial markets were and how nothing is really real. It's all kind of an illusion. And if you just peel back the fiat system a little bit, you realize it's all based on an illusion. And so that really was the tip of the iceberg for me, that led down to all these other things that spilled over into other areas of my life. And I'm a doctor, so it allowed me to see behind the fiat healthcare matrix and realize it's extremely parallel to the financial system in terms of the perverse incentives and how it's not really what it seems. And if you just peel back a little bit, you see what really is driving everything. And it really goes back to the money. Everything's downstream of the money. And if you look at fiat food, you look at fiat media. And so I love how you talk about how it forces you to be more conscious about what you're doing, because I'm just so grateful that I had this awakening, not just for the money aspect, but for all these other things that it helped me become more conscious of in my life. I'm so happy that I found Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin triggered me to have these awakenings, because I look back at how I was before Bitcoin and I just feel like I was just asleep. I was just walking through life asleep, like a sheep, just being herded by these systems and outsourcing all of my control and all my power to things outside of me. But Bitcoin made me realize that I don't need to outsource things to other things. I can just find the power within myself and then live from within, as opposed to taking everything without and trying to figure things out. Just tap into the power within. And it's such an I'm just so grateful to have this shift in my perspective, in my consciousness.
Yeah, I think a few things there. First off, I honestly don't think it really matters how much Bitcoin someone has today. The fact that you understand what your problem is, making the switch to something you think is better, I think is the most empowering thing about all of this. Eventually, how much it buys you obviously will help you in life, right? But I would say once you understand that you should save your time and energy or your wealth in Bitcoin, it also forces you to reflect on, okay, what do I actually want to do? What do I think is valuable? You don't want to play these games or fuel this system anymore. And I think that is actually something that before, like you mentioned also with yourself, and I mean, I've also experienced that, like you go through life in a very unconsciously ignorant way. Like you are unconsciously incompetent. I don't know if you know that you have the hierarchy of competence, like this pyramid. And so it goes from unconscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious incompetence, right? So unconscious incompetent, unconscious competence is like you're driving a car without thinking. And that has the right intuition, but like unconscious incompetence has the wrong intuition. So even though you think you are doing things, when you are like, when I think back when I was like 25 living in Amsterdam, now I look back and I think like, how the hell did I survive? I couldn't even remember. I cannot even remember today what I was thinking then. So I was like grossly unconsciously incompetent, but I was still doing things. I was still following some sort of path or my intuition or however you want to call it. And luckily in some way I survived 10 years in Amsterdam. And I think again, that also that like coming to that realization that I am doing something that I don't understand, or I'm following a path that I don't understand, or I'm being influenced apparently by something I don't understand. Having that realization along the way, and just having the brief thought of like, why am I doing this? And then being annoyed with the fact that you don't really know why you're doing it, I think is an interesting signal that people could look out for and be like, okay, let's just dig into this little corner and try to figure out, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think I just had a podcast with Ahmad Amous, who's also a doctor, right? And he's writing a book about Fiat medicine. And then he also shares my whole idea of becoming a doctor was to heal people and really cure, but it's more about treatment. And so I think you probably have a similar arc there, right?
Yeah.
But when you then try to figure out, okay, where is this coming from? Eventually you end up with the money. The money is the core of everything, like you said. I just had another podcast where we talked about this. When you understand that if you have a value exchange with someone and the reward side of that value exchange is corrupted and in summary is losing its value forever, then your incentive to create value to earn that reward also goes down. And that is, I think, just very simple. This is the first thing people need to understand. And then from there, that is the start, the seed of any incentive that follows after. So like you said, everything is downstream from the money. I think the full sentence should be everything is downstream from the quality of the money, right? It should, that will be the full sentence, in my opinion. And that is also why, of course, the Keynesian economists say, no, we need to create more units because that creates growth and people will do things. But they only talk about nominal growth, right? They talk about numbers. They don't talk about real value being added. And for example, I live in a home that is over 100 years old. My doors and my staircase are prettier than modern day doors and staircases, right? Because apparently there was a carpenter who was like, oh, I'm going to put in my effort. I'm going to make a beautiful thing here. So the people that live here enjoy the door that I made. I don't know how many carpenters are thinking that today, but there's probably more like factories that just push together like 3 plates of wood and like that is now a door. But like the whole craftsmanship and the beauty and that all degrades because the quality of the reward is going down. And I think that is eventually a very logical conclusion, but it's very hard to see. But once you get to that conclusion, then you realize, okay, I've never been told what money is. No one explained to me what the quality of the money would actually imply, like more the philosophical explanation of money or the money that we chose for whatever reason. And was chosen for us. Once you realize you've been lied to about money, arguably the most important technology in the world that we use to exchange value or express value also, right? Because if you spend money on something, you communicate what you find important or worthy of your money. So if that technology is corrupted and no one ever really told me about it, and this is the seed of every incentive in the world, yeah, what else isn't true that I think is true, right? And even that realization is on one side pretty fucked up, right? Like just realizing that might be the case. And then just because you look through like the veil or the filter that is surrounding the money, it also becomes easier to check other things that you thought were true or just assumed. And that could basically be about any topic, right? From health to history to the food whatever. But yeah, if people lie about the money, that's probably the biggest lie ever, right? Everything under that, I would say, or everything else is probably, yeah, just under that. Does that make sense? Yeah, if you realize that, then what else isn't true? And I think that's why people call this the rabbit hole of Bitcoin. It is as simple as when people say the winners write history, but when you actually realize that that is very true, then yeah, you just start thinking for yourself. And I think that also comes from the empowerment that Bitcoin gives you, that you know that this is something that you can fully dissect and study and reflect upon to then make a conscious decision whether you want to adopt it or not. And of course, that is a certain narrative / understanding that you create. But then when you project that on all these other topics that someone else told you a certain version of, you start realizing you don't have any understanding of these other topics. And then, yeah, for some people that triggers them to study further, and other people don't. But I think once you see this, it's very hard to ignore all the other things that you're noticing, because your intuition is probably more and more right on thinking that, yeah, you've learned the best version for you to know, to not ask questions about it after. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an incredible answer. And you just helped me have an epiphany about exactly why it helps trigger this spiritual awakening in a lot of people. It's exactly what you just said about triggering the questioning of your reality. So I think that is a fundamental part of going down a spiritual journey, is questioning reality. And that's what Bitcoin starts people down the path, or down that path. Because once you start questioning money, then you start questioning other things, like you said. But then you get to questioning the fundamental nature of reality, the fabric of reality itself, and who you are. Like the question, who am I? Bitcoin leads you to that question. And when you get to that question of who am I, that often triggers a lot of spiritual epiphanies in a lot of people, just questioning who you are as a person, instead of just blindly following this path that you've been going down. Just take a step back and, who am I? Am I really this person, or is this just the persona that I've created? And am I the consciousness behind that persona? It's pretty deep when you get into it.
Yeah, no, it's if you listen to what I talk about, I fully agree with this. This is I like that you're touching upon it, because I'm not really sure how I ended up here, where I am. Basically, my time is spent on family, Bitcoin, consciousness, AI, and like quantum physics, whatever stuff, which is intertwined with the consciousness part, right? And yeah, it's interesting because I know where I ended up. So maybe we can continue there, like what you said. When that curiosity is so triggered, where you think, okay, because the funny part is when you are curious, and I think, by the way, a common theme is curiosity that I've learned. So there are many people that aren't curious, or that aren't triggered by certain things that we saw along the way that kind of triggered us in realizing that we weren't aware of what we're doing, etc. There are a lot of people that are ignorant, and the ignorance is bliss, because only when you start questioning stuff, that is when you start to experience certain challenges, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So once you see it, you do have a certain problem of going further to understand, or else you're like that is a harder mental struggle. That's the Matrix movie. Literally, that's the guy who knows the Matrix exists, but still says, I go back to eat a steak. I know it's all fake, but I'm going to go back to eat a steak. Right. I would assume there are people that are like that. So that is fine. But if you go to the red pill, as they call it, I do think you need a little red pill before you orange pill, actually. But yeah, again, like, is money the only subject? No, there's everything else. And just if we touch upon the topic of who am I, what am I, I don't know. I also feel like it's a natural thing. Like you just end up there, okay, but what am I doing here? What is my purpose? How did I come here? Like, where did I come from? Where do I go to? And that is also something, if you're curious and you start to realize that in Eastern tradition, people have talked about this for centuries, maybe the entirety of the existence of any civilization in the East, for example. And also, maybe that's a good bridge. Like, what else have we not been told, right? If you go into history, I don't know if Graham Hancock, you know who that is?
Yeah.
So he just searches for He thinks there's ancient civilizations and stuff like that people came before us, way before us, like hundred thousands of years ago, that were also very advanced and stuff like that. There are certain remnants. So I'm not saying if it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. But the fact that there are remnants from the past that kind of point towards that being a big possibility, let's call it that. And when I look at it the same way that I looked at Bitcoin, and I realized that if I just follow rationality and logical thinking, that at least what is being presented is undeniable. It is worthy of being debated, let's call it like that. And then, because I think the connection here is that then when you see that like all these old civilizations were very interested in the universe, in the stars, in aligning with today is autumn equinox, right? Like they are aligned with the celestial bodies and how that goes. And they use that to determine their place in this, whatever this is, right? And also understand where it's going, what has been, and trying to create this paradigm or the construct to make sense of whatever they were experiencing, right? And to make certain monuments that would help the people after them to also understand that, right? And so when you go further down that path, okay, what is going on? Where am I? In what? Why? Where do I come from? And all these things. It is, at least for me, it was a real revelation to just see that is the question. That is the question that everyone before us has asked themselves from one or more times, right? But this is the question. What am I? So what am I really? And I think now that I'm reflecting on it, like that has really been a big part for me, just using the curiosity from Bitcoin to also project that on like other topics and to just stay curious and keep asking questions. And eventually, in my case, doing some regular psychedelics, exploring that and combining that with just studying, and eventually really having a mystical experience, as they call it, with an ego death and all these things, to just realize that, like you said, we are the consciousness we experience, and that you and I come from the same place, that we both are what Thomas Campbell, I don't know if you know him, my big toe, my big theory of everything. He calls this us like an individuated unit of consciousness, right? That is experiencing whatever this is as the observer in your meat suit, and that the meat suit is actually basically a computer with physical lenses that is interpreting the reality that is unfolding in front of you. And so that was a big step, I know, but like that is eventually, I think, why also that is so interesting, that we now also live in a time where all this information is out there and people are sharing it. And like you said, there are more and more people from all walks of life and levels and whatnot that are experiencing something like this. And I think the internet is also a big accelerant of sharing these stories and experiences. Whereas, of course, before, that was way harder. So I know that was a long answer with a lot of side steps, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, that was an incredible answer. And something you said towards the end referred to this idea that we're all fractals of source. So we're all, everything that exists in the universe is a fractal of source, of consciousness. Yes. And that's how the Bitcoin network is. I realized this recently. Like we're all nodes. Like there's the computer programming part of it and the Bitcoin computer network, but then there's also the people component of that. So just as a person who uses Bitcoin and is aware of Bitcoin, we are nodes in the Bitcoin network, and we're all a part of the Bitcoin network. So we all are Bitcoin. So it's essentially how consciousness works, is how Bitcoin works. They're parallel. It's all part of the same thing.
But then they're not parallel. They are a fractal, a mirror, right? Yeah. And so this, I hope people stick along, but this I absolutely love and I fully agree with. So I'll tell you how I got there. I also have a book that everyone needs to read. Two books, actually. One is, can you see it? Oh, here's the camera. Untethered Soul, Michael Singer.
I love that book. Yeah, that's incredible.
This is my, I don't want to say Bible, but this is the main, there's like 100 books that eventually get to the same conclusion. This was just written in a way that appealed to me. And I think Michael Singer is just an amazing writer. And I have this one. It's called Stalking the Wild Pendulum by
Okay.
Itzhak Bentov. That's this guy. He died in the 1970s, but he has, at least from what I've consumed, the most probable explanation as to how the reality is constructed. Actually, his work is foundational to the whole CIA remote viewing stuff and the gateway tapes. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
yeah,
this is the basis of that, basically. And so when I just started getting interested in, okay, what's the nature of our reality? I started to watch a lot of different stuff, from like math documentaries. Is God a number? That's a really interesting one. Or The Colors of Infinity, which is about the Mandelbrot fractals. And actually when I saw that one, so you know what the Mandelbrot fractal is? No. You know what that is? So it's like these videos where you have this pattern that's infinitely zoomed in. Do you know that? And that it changes colors and shape and stuff like that. So that is the Mandelbrot fractal. If you see the image, you know what this is. Okay. Actually, fun fact, I think, and I should have written this down, but there's a painting from like 1600 or 1500 where actually this fractal is depicted. But this was only discovered in like the 50s, 1950s or something. So that's also interesting, right? Like a lot of old symbolism resembles what quantum physicists and stuff now actually are visualizing, right? And so that's also all these little bits that made me realize, of course, people that came before us were ultimately interested in the nature of reality and the existence to understand it. Like that just makes so much sense. But anyway, so I watched the Mandelbrot fractal, and he basically wrote an algorithm that starts with this picture, and then any coordinate you pick on the image, it actually zooms in on that. So in my mind, what he basically proved is that if you and I think that we are individuated parts of consciousness, and basically we come from somewhere there, that there's like infinity up, but he actually showed that there's also infinity down, which is a mathematical explanation to some degree of what you call the fractals. It's called the Mandelbrot fractal, but if you apply that to the reality, then we live on a certain, let's say, a page in a book, right? But there's infinite pages up and infinite pages down, and you experience this plane, right? This page. So I watched that. I watched, I don't know, documentaries on black holes in space, and I don't know. So I went down a rabbit. I went also down a very esoteric rabbit hole about astrology or astrotheology, like very, very way back. And eventually I had this whole period where I was like studying and consuming and thinking. And then, I did the trip where I had the ego death. But that really felt like a prep towards that moment. And then when I had that experience, this was, by the way, in a warehouse in Brooklyn with 40 people. And it was like a sound meditation, basically. So with some guidance with sound and a shaman. And I just realized I was ready to actually experience all the things that I was like studying. And then, so I had this whole experience. At one moment, I just shed my whole body away. And then I was in the infinite nothingness and everything at the same time, basically. And I wasn't there, but I was it. So I was understanding it from the studying, but then I really experienced it. And to tie that back to Bitcoin, that fractal part, is that whatever people call God or the everything, right? Like it's a different conversation, but I think the Bible is an allegory. Like it's a story to explain this. There's like an ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that of what you are, which is the eternal consciousness or love, basically. And your physical body is the ultimate physical manifestation of that. It's the most complex physical manifestation in the world, right? We are more complex than the plant behind you or the rock outside or the tree. Doesn't mean that the rock and the tree and the plant don't have consciousness, but to a lesser degree, they are aware of it. And that is our thing. We are aware that we are aware. And understanding that there is this ultimate truth of what you are actually also helped me see Bitcoin in a more technological way, where the Bitcoin ledger is basically the ultimate engineered truth for this system. So there is a base truth. And that is the ledger. And so everything that the Bitcoin network does, or the whole entire goal of Bitcoin, or the promise of Bitcoin, is to uphold the integrity of this engineered truth, because everything else emanates from that, the creation of the trust. And like you said, all the nodes sharing, or all the nodes having a part of that engineered truth, or having that engineered truth actually, and saving it, actually make sure that this engineered truth will never go away, and is in that way also immutable. So coming from a source of absolute engineered truth, everything else happens after that. And so when we talked about the money being corrupted, being the seed for all the incentives of the people, if this is a money that is upholding its integrity by actually staying absolutely true within the context of this money system, okay, what kind of seed could that be? Because if wherever I am in this network, however much Bitcoin I have, or however much I'm using, whatever, everyone who adopts Bitcoin is aligned with this ultimate engineered truth that is basically designed to never change. That's the whole point. The whole point is that everyone agrees, air quotes, on this absolute truth. It doesn't mean agree, me saying to you, okay, I agree. No, by adopting, I already agree to it. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's how I would connect them, that once you know what the ultimate truth is, you can start aligning with that, basically, because there is nothing higher than that in a sense. And so maybe for people listening, I'm not relating Bitcoin to religion or whatever, but it's conceptually about, okay, if I know that this is true and I start adopting it and aligning with it, then I can actually work with something that I absolutely know is true. And that is actually a very empowering thing to go back to the empowerment and like the conscious choice of doing something or acting a certain way in your life. Yeah, then that's how I would probably approach thinking about that.
Man, that everything you said was so deep there. There's so many things I want to comment on, but the last thing we're talking about was this alignment with this ultimate engineered truth. And I talk about that a lot too, about the frequency of truth, how Bitcoin is resonating at a frequency of truth. And especially when you put it in cold storage and you hold it, you start to align with that frequency of truth. And like you mentioned, that it's so empowering when you finally feel that alignment with truth, because you realize that our whole life, we've never really felt that close to truth. Our lives have been filtered through this fiat lens and these fiat distortions. And our soul can feel that. Our soul can feel that we're not aligned with truth. And once you're aligned with that truth, your soul just feels so at peace. And then other parts of your life just start to shed away. Anything that's not true starts to shed away. And it affects your relationships, it affects your job, it affects your life path. Because anything that wasn't true just starts to shed away. And it's this beautiful purification of your soul. I'm so glad that I love talking to people that understand this. Because
that's well worded, actually. That's very well worded, because it is also the realization that you've outsourced everything in your life. You have outsourced. You have given other people know better than you, to people that have the same physical experience, in the sense of, who am I, what am I doing, and all these things that I just said. Who am I, where am I from, what am I doing here, what's my purpose, what's my value, what should I do, blah. They have all these things and all their own childhood experiences, traumatic, whatever they saved. But everyone has that experience in life. And so why would you outsource certain responsibilities over, well, money in this context is a tool that you can use in your life. Why would you outsource that to other people that are just as flawed as you? Why would you do that? And I think making that conscious decision that you don't want to do that anymore, that's the empowering thing. Again, I don't think it matters how much that is the empowering thing. Understanding you can actually do that, and that you don't have to just follow what everyone else is doing. It doesn't mean they're right, but it's the safest thing. It's the safest thing to do. And so I don't blame people for doing it. I was the same. I shared the example a lot that I was 30 and into Bitcoin and working at a bank. And then I had a colleague tell me, did you know the money in the bank was not yours? And I was like, what the fuck? How? What an idiot. am I? What am I participating in? What am I doing? And just that moment was very big for me, in a sense that I just truly felt that I was an idiot. Like I was doing something that I didn't understand. And that just triggered a certain curiosity. But again, that's not the same. That's probably different for anyone. But that was it for me, just realizing, okay, if it works like that, I'm an idiot, because I was actually walking around in a bank not being impressed by anyone. That was the combination, I think, by the way. So being like, okay, so these people manage money, create money, do whatever the fuck they want with the money, but they have no clue. They're not they weren't inspirational for me. They weren't curious, whatever. So I don't know, it was just like these two things together, just like hitting me, being like, okay, I need to figure this out. What is this? Yeah.
Yeah, what you're getting at is this whole decentralized movement. Instead of relying on these centralized sources for our information and for guidance on how to live our life, we're realizing that we can just tap into our own discernment. And that there's this whole decentralized spirituality movement where people are realizing that exactly what you just said. Why are we trusting this book, or why are we trusting these people to tell us how the world works or what happens after we die? If we're fractals of source and we're part of consciousness, we can just tap into our own discernment and feel what's real for us. And what's real for us is what's real for reality, because we're part of consciousness. Why are we trusting a random book or this random religion when we know the answers if we just tap into what we already know and what we're already a part of?
Yeah, so I think the religion part is very interesting. Like I feel I am moving from someone who wasn't spiritual at all, or would call themselves an atheist or whatever, to actually a very spiritual person, and having the experiences that I just shared, to also moving more towards, I don't want to say religion, but like I understand where it comes from. It makes a lot of sense. It aligns a lot with kind of like my approach to what I think is this. There's a certain personification I don't align with, but I don't think that really matters. But I think what you just said points more towards everything is already inside of you. So why would you have other people that, yeah, if you apply your own discernment, have a lesser understanding than you, whatever you think your understanding is of life? Why would I outsource certain parts of my life to that person? Does that make sense? So then it's okay, but what if I can do that? I don't need these other people. And then it's also all good, right? If you have a certain understanding of what you are and where you come from, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what you do or where you are. Then like when you die, you go back to where you came from, basically. Okay, great. So then it is, I think that is, in that sense, the enlightenment. You become lighter. It is not the light in your head or seeing something light. It is about having less of a physical pool inside your body or whatever. Like it is less connected, in a sense, to the importance of the physical experience, something like that. I haven't really thought that through, but I think it's like that. So you understand that you are both, and that everything you experience in the world is through your own is your own reflection, basically. And when you see that, yeah, then what I mean with it doesn't really matter. Like I can just do blah blah blah. I can do weird on the internet. Doesn't really matter. I don't really care what anyone thinks. You know what I mean? Like just so that I also think gives you the power of actually, again, if we apply it to Bitcoin, right? You are probably the crazy doctor guy in your in your circles, right? That is talking on the internet and into Bitcoin, but who cares if you align with what you're doing? If you can honestly say, I studied this to a certain degree, I reflected upon it to a certain degree, I think I can trust myself, then that is the best thing you can do in your life, I think. And that for me also ties into that spiritual part of Bitcoin, in the sense that you are confronted with other people every day, people of different statures, or images, or how do you say, personalities, or whatever levels, and they say, oh, Bitcoin is stupid or a scam or this or that or blah blah. And so when you are into Bitcoin and you think you are making the right decision based on totally your own study and reflection, etc., that's why we should say that's why we say study Bitcoin, not buy Bitcoin. Like you need to understand what you're getting into. You're constantly confronted every day with the question, can I still trust myself? Can I still trust my own discernment, like you said, right? Can I still do that? And if yes, then just carry on. It doesn't really matter that other people don't understand it. Like, that is irrelevant. But because you are confronted with a majority that dismisses it or doesn't understand it or thinks they hate it or whatever their motivation is, right? It is very hard to stay true to your own conviction, again, based not on what anyone else said, but based on what you did. So can you still trust yourself? And I think Bitcoin is probably the only technology that you can adopt, that you can like study yourself fully and actually understand. Like, it is all that information is out there, and it's not easy, but it's all out there, right? And or at least there's enough out there so you can make a conscious decision as to whether you want to adopt it or not. Whereas with all these other things, and especially fiat money, that is non-existent. So that also is something that I find truly beautiful about Bitcoin, in a sense that when you conceptually get there, you can actually practically also do it and learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we've been talking about some pretty esoteric things, and it's probably not what a lot of people are going to be able to comprehend. But I actually think that what we've been talking about is the heart of what Bitcoin is. And these conversations are so important. So everything we've been talking about hits at exactly what Bitcoin represents and why it's so important for the history of humanity. In some respects, we're actually in the greatest battle in the history of humanity right now. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is the tool that is going to allow the good side to win in this battle. And there's this concept in the spiritual community, and Eckhart Tolle talks about a new earth. A new earth is really being born right now, and Bitcoin is central to that. And the fiat world it represents these old power structures, these old institutions. That's the old earth, and that's dying out right now. And the new earth is Bitcoin is leading the frontier. And if you just get behind Bitcoin, you're gonna be so much better off, because you're gonna be a part of this new earth. If you don't, you're gonna get left behind, and you're gonna be in this old earth, and it's gonna be a dark path, whereas Bitcoin represents the light path. So that's why I got involved with this podcast, because I'm a doctor. I had no intention of ever doing this podcast, but I feel like I have to do my part to help humanity move into this new earth and away from that old earth it's falling apart. And I want people to see that there is light, because what you talked about, there is a dark path, and there's a lot of chaos in the world right now, for sure. But there's also this path of light, and Bitcoin is the way.
Yeah, I agree. This is something that is also in the Bentoff book, but something that I recently, someone said something, and then I just realized, oh yeah, that is very good. So all the physical existence in the world basically comes from the polarity of positive and negative, right? Nothing can exist without a positive and a neutral side. Like, literally, it cannot exist, right? Like the yin and yang is about that there is a darkness in the light part, or else light doesn't even exist. Like, the pure definition of the white doesn't exist without being a little black, and the same goes for the black, right? So there is no light without dark, or good without bad. That, I think, is an age old, that is as old as people live. But it is normal that some people are drawn to the light and some people are drawn to the dark. And I don't remember who said it, but like, we have to have empathy and love for all the Bitcoin haters and all the Bitcoin critics that are ignorant, because without them, there isn't any motivation for you to do this, or for me to do whatever I'm trying to do. And so the fact that the darkness exists is actually the source of the motivation for you to participate in something that you think brings light. And when you view it like that, it's okay that there are people against Bitcoin. It's okay that people are, I don't know, stuck jerking off on OnlyFans the entire day and then going into credit card debt to watch some boobies on the internet. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's all part of it, because without that, there's no incentive to create some form of light. And I agree with you that there is I've always seen the world as like a battle of ideas. There's a war. It's a war of ideas, and eventually ideologies. And ideologies are actually ideas that have conquered a certain mind share, for example. And then it becomes something that people spread further, and it becomes more an ideology. And I think that Bitcoin was born as an idea and eventually is moving on towards an ideology, because if not Bitcoin, then what? When you have some people like Nico Moran says, is Bitcoin or slavery? But people don't like the word slavery, especially also the country that I'm from, but because it resonates in a certain way. But it is either Bitcoin, self-sovereignty, self-governance, and the self-actualization we talked about, or you are a subject of someone else. And so if that other person, if you agree that other person is no better than you, and you shouldn't outsource any aspect of your life to that other person, then you should not go along with that, right? It's a very binary choice. Do I want to take ownership of my life that is, how do you say, like it is like nothing in the eternity of time? Is that what I want to do with this one chance that I've gotten to experience the physical reality? Or do I want to be more in control of that experience and actually feel that empowerment, right? I think that is something that, again, it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have, just that feeling of that experience is already something that many people have not felt. And I also haven't felt, like I said, if couldn't remember what I was doing 10 or 15 years ago. No fucking clue. No idea what drove me, what I was working towards or whatever. And I lived in a home and by myself, and I had relationships, like I was doing stuff, but I have no clue, like literally no clue what was guiding me, right? And so again, it's not about whether you've experienced that or not. Everyone has experiences that. It's about if you get out of that. And therefore, I think Bitcoin is a tool because it gets you out of the thing that is keeping you stuck the most, which is the technology of money. And like you said, that is the biggest technological shift that we could participate in, the separation of the money and the state, and making the money something that is truly independent of anyone, and only rewarding the people in terms of gaining value from using Bitcoin that actually contribute to it. And that is also, again, the beauty of Bitcoin, that this whole incentive structure that is built in. So I think Bitcoin is a tool to actually take the roots you have in this old predatory system and plant something new, whatever you want to do. Again, it doesn't, if you want to be a Bitcoiner and bake cookies or whatever, it doesn't really matter. That's irrelevant. What do you want to do in your life? It's about, it's a tool that helps you to disconnect from the system that is using you instead of you being a true actor in it.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful insights. Have you heard of this idea that potentially Bitcoin could have been sent from this counter-entropic realm? Like we're talking about the non-physical realms, and it's because quantum physics is basically showing that the physical reality is only 0.001% of all reality. So everything else is really these energies and frequencies and vibrations. To me, it doesn't seem too far outside of the stretch of imagination to think that there's other realms that exist that we just don't know much about. And right now, in the current world that we live in, there's so much entropy, and it seems like we were going down a pretty dark path. And so it's possible, or it's plausible in my mind, that Bitcoin or Satoshi came from this other realm to either save us because he saw that we were going down a bad path, or he had just reached a point technologically where we were ready to have this upshift, and we couldn't do it without the gift of Bitcoin to guide us to this higher collective consciousness. And now we're ready to join the cosmic order. So do you think there could be any truth to that?
Yes. Wait, I'm looking up a tweet. Wait. Yeah. Okay. So I had this tweet that says the Bitcoin time chain is the highest form of ordered information humans have ever created. That's what we just talked about. The ledger is a form of low entropy, right? It is high order, because the blocks are ordered in a certain way, right? The transactions are ordered in a certain way. So this information is basically researchable, reviewable, dissectable, whatever, by everyone, anywhere, anytime, all the way to the genesis, basically. So it is, in that sense, the highest form of ordered information, but also the lowest form, like that. Yeah. So the lowest form of entropy. And so where what is the highest form of entropy before Bitcoin is. Where from the chaos does it come from? Where from the everything does it come from in terms of high entropy before it gets turned into low entropy? That is, of course, the infinite amount of energy in the world, which is a chaos thing. And through the technology with the mining, etc., we are creating eventually down this entire path the lowest form of entropy in the world created by humans. And I have this other tweet that says lower entropy is higher stability, predictability, and potential for growth. Literally the words from Thomas Campbell that talks about reality in that way. And so when something becomes more stable, more predictable, and has more potential for growth, that is when people adopt it, right? And so he's talking about it, about life form in this context. Is we talk about Bitcoin as being a life form. This is actually helping Bitcoin. So the longer it exists, right? What's that called again? There's a certain law, right? The longer something exists, the more the probability of it surviving goes higher. That comes from this, but just worded in a different way. And I have another tweet that says Bitcoin is a portal for going from a high entropy financial system to a low entropy financial system also. So what we talked about, the current financial system is highly chaotic, unauditable, explainable, not understandable by the regular person. Whereas with Bitcoin, anyone can run a node, anyone can view the software, anyone can view or download the ledger. And so those two things are huge contradictions, because the lower entropy one actually creates what I just said, the better predictability, etc. So this is what you should adopt, is the lower entropy one instead of the higher entropy one, because when you think about it in a certain way, the lower entropy one has a higher chance of existing and staying like that, actually reinforcing itself to even becoming more ordered, basically. And so the more economic energy is stored in Bitcoin, the higher its probability of surviving. Does that make sense? So the more, simplifying it, you could say the more people adopt it, the more a chance it has to survive. That's perhaps a more like social type explainer. But the more information is stored in Bitcoin, the longer it exists, the more people are incentivized or invited to store information in it by using it, by the way, ordinals, cat pics, whatever. It's about creating that ultimate truth and perpetuating that into the future. And that is what actually increases the reliability, integrity, etc. And when you think about it like that, I think it goes back to this fractal thinking that you also mentioned. It is so perfect, in my opinion, when you look at it like this. It is so much aligned with nature, or the nature of reality in its essence, that it deserves to exist, right? It is very much undeniable that this is something that deserves to exist, and also deserves our attention, right? And if it comes from a higher dimension that gifted this to us, I don't know, that is difficult. But I think there is something very special about this, where you can approach it from a lot of different ways and a lot of different perspectives and, how do you say, fields, and they all come to a certain conclusion, right? Even how Bitcoin grows with the adoption following a certain power law that you also see in nature and all these things. Like, it is, let's say, just very interesting. Let's keep it with that. And there are not a lot of things that align so much with these other fields. For example, the explanation of the reality in our incarnation, etc. I don't know if that was an answer, but because I don't know, I cannot speculate if it was brought to us. But I think it is a gift. I think it is a true gift. And I really think it is also at the level of what people say, the wheel or fire. Conceptually, can never die, right? It's English or math or chess. It can never die. So the fun thing is that I think in the short term, people are very much distracted with whatever they read online or whatever some person says or whatnot, but it can literally never die. So would you rather pay attention to something that can never die conceptually? It'll always be here, always be a mirror to whatever other type of money exists. And when you understand that the type of money that exists today, the fiat money, has already died several times before when it was attempted like that, and people have always moved to a better money. Yeah, I think the steps eventually are quite short and simple, but to put it into the bigger perspective and understand why it exists today, the problem you have, waking up to that, being curious, all these things that we talked about, that I think is the bigger arc than to then look back and realize, okay, no, this is actually a very logical and needed progression for what we call money. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you so much. And I definitely agree that conceptually it can never die. So now that it's been released into the ether, nothing can kill it. But I had Ione Appleberg on my show a couple months back, and he was talking about how, although that's true that conceptually it can never die, our current iteration of society could potentially create a version with layers that does lead to it not working. But if that were to happen, maybe the next iteration of society in like 50 or 100 years would, because the idea is out there, the next iteration of society would have to rebuild it. So that kind of scared me a little bit because I've always thought of this iteration as being infallible and it's so anti-fragile, nothing can stop it. But now I'm worried that us humans do have some element here and we can mess it up. And this whole core versus knots thing has got me worried a little bit too, for the first time ever, about Bitcoin and its fallibility. So what are your thoughts on that?
If it doesn't work, this is a good question. I don't think I've ever said this on a podcast, but if it doesn't work for us, then it's not for us. Then we're fucked. But then it's not for us. And that's why you shouldn't stop talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's why it's great you started this. And I think there should be, that's why I started my thing. And that's why I think more people should talk about it. It doesn't just come into existence or is adopted just because it exists. I think everything we talked about is adjacent to that, in a sense that just because you figured it out doesn't mean the rest has figured it out. And the fiat spell or enchantment is just incredibly strong. I think that's also where a little courage comes, in a sense that, yeah, of course you should talk about it. Like, again, Bitcoin or else what? Like, what else would you go back to or adopt? You look through that veil and you know that this is a solution for a perpetual problem that is accelerating on the other side. By the way, we didn't even talk about the problem, but that problem exists and it's accelerating and it's becoming bigger. And that, combined with the technological advancements like AI, the outlook for that is way worse than having to fight for the disincarnation of Bitcoin, the current, let's call it the current, right? I think it's an interesting point, but my question would be, or else what? So you could be like, okay, this thing has me scared because these people do blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. And then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to outsource it again? Or are you going to talk about it or try to contribute or try to get more people to understand this or not? So it's the same question. What are you going to do about it? So are you ignorant and you're going to be like, I'm not going to do anything about it? That is not what you should do. Or do you consciously choose to actually try? I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I don't want euros and I don't want dollars and I don't want a CBDC and I don't want chat control or closed off internet or digital ID or digital medical passport or all this fucking bullshit made up by other people no better than me. So I'd rather have a neutral, decentralized, global money that no one can ever fuck with. So that is my choice. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but for now, I would say that, yeah, like I said before, it's a fight. Of course it's a fight. What do you think? There are people that are having a free lunch, while there are other people that are making ends meet in America with 150K a year. Does that make sense? Like there are people that are struggling and there's other people that are just not noticing. They have no problems whatsoever. And that is eventually what the fiat money system creates. It's a predatory system. And I think Bitcoin is a better money system. And I'm happy to try and fight for it. This is not without a struggle. What do you think? Yeah, of course there is a struggle. This is the biggest technological battle to ever exist. So Of course, there's a struggle. This is not easy. Just because it exists doesn't mean that everyone else gets it. It's very clear that not everyone else gets it. So it is very important that we don't stop talking about Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very inspirational the way that you've created your life, how you're essentially fully in this Bitcoin frequency and spreading the good news. And yeah, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we close it out?
I wonder what the biggest thing is that you learned about yourself, or on your journey where you were like, okay, this I really cannot deny.
The biggest thing that I'm on the journey now. It's who am I? I'm not who I thought I was. Even my role as a doctor, I've been a doctor for 15 years, and I just blindly went down that path. And before Bitcoin, I never questioned it. I just thought I was doing what I was supposed to do and going to work and taking care of patients. But now that I've had this Bitcoin awakening, I've questioned everything about what I do for work and who I am, because I've always thought of myself as a healer. And the fiat world makes you think that if you're a doctor, you're a healer. But now that I've peeled back what I've peeled back, I realize that I'm not even really contributing to making people healthy at all. All I'm doing is giving people pills, because I was indoctrinated by my medical school, which is funded by the pharmaceutical companies, to think that whenever there's anything wrong with a person, then the answer is to give them a pill. And that was what I was dedicating my whole life force to. And so now that I realize that I'm essentially just a pawn in this bigger game, it's got me questioning not only who I am in terms of my job, but who I am as a person. And it's been this deep journey, and I'm just at the beginning still. And I'm just glad that there's other people like you that can relate to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that is amazing. And thanks for sharing. I think that is amazing. And eventually, yeah, it ties back to what I said before. It doesn't really matter what you eventually end up doing or how you do it or whatever. It's about whether you're aware of what you're doing. That is, I think, the whole point. It is not about how rich you are or what you do or all these things. It's about just that, what you are now into. And just doing that, in my experience, is already very rewarding. That is, again, that is so funny, right? When you listen to some religious texts or just like old, just expressions like the journey is the destination, like all that shit is true. It's funny, but not a lot of people go on the journey, if that makes sense. Not a lot of people are like, okay, I am somewhere. I don't really know where I am. I don't really know what I am, but I'm quite interested to figure that out. And that is step one, is stepping into the unknown, the uncertainty, having that courage to do that, to realize that you don't know everything, and just trying something, right? Like just attempting something by your own conscious choice, and not being led again by whatever other people do or say or request, because who says that they have figured it out? And then even when they figured it out, doesn't really matter, because that is their experience of their experience. So all that stuff is irrelevant. It's about what you do and your choice, and having the courage to start to explore that. And wherever you end up, it doesn't really matter as long as you try. So I love that you share that, and I think that's great and admirable and very cool. And yeah, I wonder where you end up. So thank you so much for also this conversation. Yeah. Like I said, I think it's really fun to be on the other side of the mic, and doing that gives me a lot of opportunity to also reflect on where I am and in my thinking, and have that opportunity. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. So thanks.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative that you came on and you've shared things during this discussion that I haven't heard you talk about before. So I'm really glad to bring out that depth in you.
And I talked a lot on the podcast.
No, you've got some incredible insights, and I'm going to go back and watch this probably several times, because I know there's a lot of things that you said that are going to help me on this spiritual journey. Thank you so much.
I that would be very cool. This is just my understanding and my story. If it's helpful, then that's amazing. And yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Of course. Yeah. Have a good day.
You too.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise. It doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless, will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on the Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the Signal.